studio, Pastor Makakula. Let's give him a shout out as we welcome him. Yeah, welcome, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming through.
Joy to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, awesome, man. We are so excited to have you. We are happy when you said yes. We were so happy. But just before we get into our talk, just tell the people out there who you are, what you do, what you are all about, and then we are going to get to our talk for tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much once again for having us. As you introduced me, Mzwandile Ps Jacob Msipha, based in Witbank, lead pastor of Impactors Church Witbank, married to an amazing lady, Mzwandile Ps Jacob.
Wow.
And we together lead the church in Witbank. But over and above that, I'm just passionate about leadership. I'm a mentor, coach, certified coach. I have various things that I do within the leadership community, trainings, team buildings, corporate organizations. We've got a podcast that we have as well within the space of leadership. And we love mentoring and adding value to young leaders, especially within the school context. That's what I did before branching out into full-time ministry. I was a teacher for like 5 years.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's awesome.
It's an interesting story on its own. So I taught and then moved into being a school counselor. Transitioned from being a school counselor to mentorship and coaching on a bit of a full-time basis. So in a nutshell, that's my journey, and I'm just passionate about adding value to people. Part of the vision and the mission we have within the company that we have is changing the world one individual at a time.
That's awesome.
That's what pushes and propels us along.
That's actually cool. So where do people, if people want to know more about you and what you do, where can they check you out?
They can connect with us on our website, www.mzwandilemacacula.com. Everything is there. They should be getting our email address there, our newsletters, and our content. They also will find a link to our podcast and all the things that we do on social media platforms. They should also be able to connect with us there.
That's awesome, man. We are so excited to be chatting to you. We are having the right person here even for the topic, because we are talking leadership. And when we were planning for this particular program, even the guys actually suggested somebody senior, and I said, you know what, I want to do something different, because in most cases when people talk leadership or when people think leadership, they're always thinking about people who are of certain age and so forth. So I just said, you know what, for a change, let's try and talk leadership at a certain age level and see if can't God use somebody who is young for these things of leadership. But just to kick things off, according to you, Mzwandile Ps Jacob, what is leadership in the nutshell? Because leadership means different things to different people, but according to you, what is leadership?
That's a great question. I think on my side, I would say leadership is extreme ownership. It's extreme ownership of your life. I love what you do in the Builder's Diary, because it's not limited to what's one's spiritual life, but business and other facets and areas of functioning. So leadership to me would be extreme ownership, whether it's in your business, in your personal well-being, in your emotional life, in your relationships, finances, whatever it is, but taking extreme ownership to the extent that the buck ends with you. So whether it happens or it doesn't happen, you are the leader. So I often say, which a leader doesn't go with the flow, but they create the flow. And that's the extreme ownership part of saying, as in, I'm creating the flow I want to. I'm not a victim, but I'm in whatever it is, the results, positive, negative, I've created them. If I don't like them, I'm taking ownership to create the ones that I would want to experience and have.
That's awesome. And I've never thought of leadership in that way. I've had definitions before of leadership, but I think that's for me enlightening in a way, because it says to me, when you are a leader, in other words, you need to be in charge of your life, you need to be in charge of your finances, you need to be in charge of your marriage, because that's also one way of leading, which for me, I think it excites me in one way or the other. But if we take things further, then when you are a leader, do you think that a leader is born a leader? And that's a question that's often asked, and I've had people respond in so many different ways when it comes to that. But how does one become a leader? When does it begin? And can I decide that I want to be intentional and become a leader?
I love that, because I think, as you said, it's the question of nurture versus nature. So I would say, within the backdrop of extreme ownership, that one decides to be a leader. You intentionally, once you make a conscious decision to say, I want to take charge of my personal growth, development, emotional well-being, whatever it is, and I want to begin to take intentional steps.
Sure.
This is now where the growth part, because growth is not automatic. I think that's one of the things within leadership here. Which it's not automatic. It needs intention. It needs you to be saying, okay, I want to be a leader. Others might be born with innate leadership qualities, but there are those who intentionally tell themselves, okay, I want to be a leader.
Sure.
And this is where you begin to expose yourself to amazing leaders like yourself through books, that amazing leadership books that you wrote, consuming content that will help you become a better leader. So maybe to your question, it would be a space of how one can intentionally decide. It's not something that it's for an elite group, for these laba baholi, these are the leaders, laba banye know their followers. But because leadership to a certain extent as well becomes servitude. Once you begin to serve, to serve your family, I serve my wife, I'm a leader. If I'm serving my kids, if I've got kids, I'm a leader. If I'm serving people, so it's a decision which one takes ownership of and intentionally begins to grow in.
That's awesome, and I like it. But now, the people who, let's say for an example, because there are other people who don't struggle, they stand out. Even from school at a young age, they stand out. You know, it comes natural to them to be at the forefront of things, to be influencing things. Is there a need for them then to, at a certain stage, to also work on themselves in terms of developing themselves, and so that they can become better leaders, or they will just, become great, through and through?
I love this, because maybe let me answer it within this backdrop of the leadership triangle, which has 3 bases: personal leadership, public leadership, and purpose leadership. So taking Jesus' life, for example, he spent 30 years within personal leadership. He was born, fed the multitudes, for 30 years. And then only 3 years we see him in public leadership, feeding the sick, healing the sick, rather feeding the multitude. That's public. And then only 3 days purpose leadership. So this begs the question to which someone can find themselves automatically by default to public leadership, but in personal leadership, and the danger of that is one can be a public success but personal failure.
Oh my goodness.
Where you, like David, you're able to kill Goliath and everyone is clapping, but you are unable to defeat that small voice that says sleep with Unga Uri. And this is the part again now of personal leadership, where one says, because my gift will make room for me, but my character will keep me within that room. So this is that personal leadership where I say, okay, I might be in public maybe by default, maybe because I'm a boss, or I'm a CEO, I'm the owner, or I know more than others and I've seen more than others. But it takes a certain level of maturity and wisdom, I would say, that causes one to say, I actually want to begin to invest in my personal leadership. And the importance of this is because at the end of the day, you are with yourself more than you are with others. So if you've not led yourself well, it's going to be a bit hard for you to lead others, because you always stand. So I think that's the importance to your question of one investing intentionally in their personal leadership. So when people push against it, it's what will make you stand.
Oh my goodness, that's so awesome. Now let's bring in the age element, because we're talking leadership, especially young people as leaders. The notion has always been that you can't lead, especially at certain levels, until you are of a certain age. We see even us as young pastors, it's quite challenging to be heard, because you might be showing signs of leadership, but we at some point struggle. So, but according to you, what does the role of age play in this whole leadership thing? Does even age matter for that matter?
That's an amazing question, and I'm laughing because if you still are deemed a young pastor, such
my goodness, you will be shocked. Because I'm always asking myself, when does it end to be young?
That was my question. I think I just scratch your itch, but if you're still struggling with it, I might as well throw in that out. I think maybe I think Paul, when writing to Timothy, let no one despise you because you are young, I think he's somewhat for new, and so there might be this despising of some sort towards one being young. Because I think you have to overcompensate for your age oftentimes. There are certain places I grew up in a traditional church. And you would see what you need, even though you might have maybe content, but you now need to be very intentional about the container, which is part of oftentimes when you go to a senior audience, you now have to compensate by how you dress, how you approach,
how you carry yourself.
Especially yourself, because you always trendy and your dress code is on another level.
Thank you.
Which is something we really appreciate. But there are certain spaces where
of course. I wouldn't. There are certain places that I wouldn't show up dressed like how I dress even in my own church, because I know that perhaps I will not even make it to the pulpit. And if I can just throw in a very interesting story there, because as you know, I had a spiritual father who passed on last year, and who is a man who actually taught me a lot. He's been a father in my life, mentored me, fathered me, and did all of those things. And I remember one day I was going to attend a conference at KCC, and I showed up with a suit but not wearing a tie, and I was supposed to speak. And funny enough, I didn't know that I was going to speak. I showed up in the morning and he said to me, I want you to preach. And he said, but I'll forgive you tie, and he said, go and find the tie somewhere. And I had to borrow a tie. But at the later stage, because my spiritual father was very transformed, and then he started actually appreciating the adjustment that I was bringing in, and and I started changing the way that, and he kind of looked at me one day and he said to me, hey, which is a very challenge, because as young people, like you have correctly said, we have got to overcompensate. We've got to work 10 times harder to make sure that we are recognized, we are seen. But let me also follow up on that and say, but is there space for young leaders? Is there room for young leaders? Because in there are different spheres where there's a leadership void. It's obvious. It's seen. In the political world, you can tell that things are lacking a bit. In the church world, you can tell that things are lacking a bit. In business and so forth and so on. But is there room? Is there space? Is even our nation, our country ready for young people? Are they ready for it?
There's definitely a need for young leaders, because I think whether we speak or not, there is a void, as you mentioned. There's a vacuum of leadership. And to the extent that, take the younger generation, I think maybe twofold. One would be, even with us being young, having the wisdom to understand that we are corner, but we're not shining because the spotlight is not on us. And being able to honor, for example, your leadership, those ahead, you mentioned your spiritual father, and lead within delegated authority. So this is where Joshua, son of Nun, is not departing from the tabernacle. Moses is in, but Joshua is but lead yet. But leadership serve Moses. So that by the time the opportunity presents itself, Moses, my servant, is dead, Joshua, now arise. You're able to arise, but arise from a vacuum. You've been in hiding, you've been in training. So I think for us young leaders, it's important for us to understand and observe protocol as well, because I think one of the iffy things as well is, even though sometimes they might want to give us platform, but on which we're not ready for it, we're not mature, we've not mastered the mind for it, because there are certain things that obviously come with age. It comes with age. So there is the void, and I think as young leaders ought to rise up. But I think one of the things that will help us make our voice more authentic and carry more weight is to have voices that speak to us, so that we know that as we lead, we are being led as well.
No, that's awesome. And I do believe that even our country will become a better country if we can find ourselves in a situation that we are creating platforms for young blood, as they call us, young blood, to come in and to have a voice. But what are the practical things, for an example, that if one is intentional about developing themselves as leaders, let's say here I am, I have that desire in my heart, I say, you know what, I also want to be seen, I want to make things happen. What are the practical things that I can start applying in my life, doing, religiously, so that, it can be seen that, what, this guy is actually serious about becoming a leader.
I think that maybe speaks to as well the law of progress or law of processes, how a leader is not born in a day, but they grow daily. So maybe I would say maybe 3 daily disciplines. So one would be within your personal space as a leader, understanding your personal growth, which as a leader, one, who am I? And that has to deal with identity. And then within that, where am I? Where am I has to do with emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, in terms of relationships, and academically, in terms of growing. So I think once you've figured out to go to Gupi and be honest with yourself, it's easier for you to begin to define Guti number within that backdrop as well. How did I get here? Because truth be told, you are not responsible for where you are, because cooler exposure and other things can, but you're responsible for who you become. So once you've figured out to where am I, then you deal with where am I going, which is the question of what are the things that I can do to get where I'm going in terms of growing as a leader. And the first one within that, I would say, is to expose yourself to leadership and growth environments. Find leaders like yourself who challenge you to grow. I think one of the things that makes you a better leader is to be in a world that's bigger than you, people who think better than you, people who are going to challenge your intellect, and begin to expose yourself, because I think that's one of the things that accelerates your growth when you are in an enlarging growth environment. And then number 2, be very intentional. You mentioned what you can do daily. Find, even if it's like a 30-minute podcast within leadership or a book that you read, but just consume something within your leadership growth. Even the Bible is a great leadership book, an amazing leadership book, but just be intentional with I want to grow as a leader, and begin to intentionally consume things that will cause you to grow in your leadership. Then thirdly and lastly, be willing to invest as well in your growth. Be willing to invest in your growth.
It's going to cost you.
It's going to cost you. And if you're serious about it, it's going to cost you. Because sometimes we think growth is cheap. And so be willing to invest, because I think sometimes it's easy for one to buy a meal somewhere and but when it has to buy a book or be part of a seminar or be part of something that's happening that will add value to them, they are a bit skeptical. And I think once we can deal with that mindset, then growth will become eminent and evident in the life of the builders that are listening to this amazing program.
That's awesome. And what you're saying, especially as your last point to say, we must invest, in our leadership development. And I always tell people that if you can study great leaders, you will discover that actually they are spending quite a lot on themselves and developing themselves. I remember even with myself growing up, and this is something that I'm still even doing now. I would do crazy things, and there's a story that I tell that I remember I wanted to attend a conference, in Pretoria somewhere. I didn't know anybody. I had to ask for accommodation in some white lady's house who could only allow me to sleep in his garage where he parked his car. And I didn't look at that. I said, you know what, all I wanted was to attend the conference. So whether I sleep underneath the car, on top of the car, whether I sleep in the kitchen or even outside, it didn't matter to me, because I was hungry for developing myself. And even to this day, I remember there was a time where I took a flight to the US all by myself, because I saw a conference online that was advertised, and something on the inside of me said, you know what, you need to be there. And it was expensive, and I had to take that step of faith, raised money, took that flight all by myself. I didn't know anybody there, and I took a flight, and by God's grace I arrived there, and I met somebody that I know from somewhere who took good care of me, booked me in a better hotel, and entertained me, took me shopping and stuff like that. But it had to start with me taking that bold step and say, you know what, I want to grow as a leader. I want to be great, and I better, even if it's miles and miles away, I will definitely go. So let's take it maybe closer to home and become a bit personal.
Maybe before we get personal, I'm sorry, just want to, for the builders who are listening, I just want to double click, because I think this is pure gold.
Thanks.
And this is really pure gold, how you had a heart to learn and be willing to invest in that space. Maybe within the relationships as well, how has that helped you within your personal growth in terms of being willing to invest even within relationships that make you better?
Yeah, of course. That's a big investment as well. I always put it like this, that relationships are a currency.
Yeah.
So as you grow as a leader, there are great leaders that you're going to meet along the way. And as a young leader growing up, you need to be sensitive to identify where the grace to lead is evident. And you need to be sensitive, discern, and realize that, this relationship is for keeps. Because sometimes God will open that window and he will close it. And if you fail to see it when it opens and be willing to spend money, even with my spiritual father, for an example, I attended every conference he had, spend my own money, sleep in hotels, and it was all for the purposes of nourishing the relationship that we had built. As a matter of fact, that was God ordained. So you are going to, as you are growing as a leader, you are going to meet many people, but you need to be wise and be sensitive enough to say, here's a leadership mantle here, and I've got to invest in it. I'm going to spend money, and you are going to look strange, foolish, following somebody around and whatever. It's going to be very awkward sometimes, but make sure that you invest in that, because it's going to at some point it's going to yield returns. And maybe just one last thing I can throw in there, because I always make this example. There is this great leader in our nation that I have a relationship with even now, and it's not a secret. I've told this story before, and that is Pastor Matebula. And the first time I met him, it was God ordained, and these are the moments that I'm talking about, that when God opens it, you need to be sensitive enough. So I was taking my family on holiday in Sun City. So, and then we met him for the first time there with his family. So at that point, I knew him as Matebula, who's on TV, pastor of Hope Restoration, and from a distance, I was like, oh wow, here's Matebula. And my wife said, go and greet, and I was a bit shy, but I had to take a step and say, go and greet, introduce myself. And secondly, we then met him at Etegwini. We were at Etegwini, we were walking around the mall, and we saw him again. Wow. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And again, he was together with his family. You know what I mean? And we reached out to him, we went to greet, and they were also excited to see us again. And we had to remind them who we are. And they said, oh yeah, we met you in Sun City. And then the last straw was when we met them in Cape Town for the third time. Wow. Similar setup. They were with their family in Cape Town, and we had just arrived. So we checked in at the hotel, and we said, you know what, let's quickly go to the mall, get some few things, and come back. And lo and behold, when we walked into the mall, there they were. And that was the moment we said, you know what, we need to sit down, have dinner together. Actually, he's the one who suggested it and said, let's sit down and have dinner and see what is it that God is trying to do here. So those are the moments that you need to make sure that you are going. And today we have a great relationship, and little did I know that he is going to play a great role, and especially in as far as my family is concerned. And even as my spiritual father is no more, he's a go-to person in as far as my marriage issues are concerned, family issues are concerned, and he's on speed dial, man. So I'm grateful for such people around me. So that is so much of a blessing. So I'm encouraging every young person out there, make sure that you take advantage of such opportunities that God will always bring your way.
That's brilliant. Builders, for those who are listening, the past 3 minutes, it's pure gold.
Oh my
Please
goodness.
go back a bit and listen to it over and over. Mfundisi just gave us a key there, a key that will change your life forever.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's bring it home and bring it closer then. As Mzwandile Makakula, now tell us, what kind of books are you reading? What kind of podcasts are you listening to? Of course, besides your one, because we are encouraging all the viewers at home to, of course, download your podcast and listen to them. What are the books that you can recommend, and what are the podcasts that one can listen to for leadership development?
Thank you so much for that. I think Ubaba, you mentioned Mfundisi Sabelo on Demand. There's a book, an amazing book that he wrote, A Resilient Spirit, based on the book of Ruth. incredible leadership principles. It's my go-to. So it's an easy read that you can finish in one setting if you're intentional about it. It's one of the go-to books that I gain a lot of wisdom from.
Yes.
My all-time favorite leadership expert is John C. Maxwell. I love him so much. My wife knows, and I really love him so much. And he's the go-to person when it comes to leadership development. I love how he speaks to relationships, equipping, and he's just holistic in his approach. So I listen to a lot of his podcast. Is one of the podcasts that I consume possibly weekly or so. Craig Rochelle as well has an amazing leadership podcast. Awesome. Craig Rochelle. And there's one I recently was introduced to by my wife, funny enough, A Lead to Win by Michael Hyatt and Megan Hyatt. It's an amazing one, especially for business leaders. It's an amazing podcast. And of course, as you mentioned, Take Your Lead podcast.
It has to be there. It has to be there.
And a book that I would definitely recommend is Arise and Build Your Book. It's an amazing leadership book. And all content by Mzwandile Ps Jacob Msipha. I think one of the things I love about your message, it's one of dominion. It's really not limited to church, but one that one can apply in their daily life. So in a nutshell, maybe that's the content.
That's your menu. That's awesome. That's great. And I've also, recently discovered Brian Houston's leadership podcast. He has a leadership podcast, which is awesome. Brian Houston. I've been devouring it for the past couple of weeks. Great. Actually, I'm catching up because I discovered it very late. So I'm actually catching up.
I love that. I think one of the things I did during lockdown as well was I discovered one, and I went back from Andy Stanley. I went back from the first episode, and during lockdown I actually finished and caught. It's amazing.
Because of course as a leader you need to consume quite a good, content for yourself, because you can't just consume, because people talk, everybody, especially because of the internet, everybody has platform to say something. So you have got to be very intentional who you listen to, who you read, because in one or the other they will shape the way that you think.
Sorry, before you continue, I think you just touched something which I think is important, and I'm doing this for you builders who are listening. I know some of you guys are listening. I wish maybe the importance of choosing the voice that you listen to, especially in a world of a lot of information. Because I think it's easy to have a lot of shepherds within consummation of information that begins to affect how you do. The importance of choosing the voice and being sure that, okay, this is my voice. I might listen to other things, but it's not moving away from the voice of, let's say, my spiritual authority.
And that's a very great question, and it's something that I always think about and share with other guys around me, because in this day and age you find many voices, and I love what the scripture says about it. It says in this world there are many voices, and then it says, and none of them are without significance. So every voice that you are open to, at the end of the day, it will lead you somewhere. It will influence you to think in a certain way, to behave in a certain way, and sometimes even unconsciously. And for me, the biggest issue, and I'm going to say this in a Christian point of view or perspective, that for me the big issue, it does not matter how great your concepts can be, it does not matter how articulate you can be. For me, it does not matter how many people you have who are following you. For me, the buck stops with doctrine. You have got to be doctrinally sound, theologically sound, because these days it's very critical. It's so sensitive that you can hear something so cool, something so awesome, that when it's said, it's like it's a wow. You know what I mean? But in most cases, if you check it against the doctrine of the scriptures, you realize that actually it's not so accurate. It's not so spot on in as far as, and the big issue is, especially talking about young leaders with us, we are inspired people. We are quick thinkers, and we are quick to think and say stuff, and sometimes before even thinking, before even checking things against the doctrine of the scripture. If there's one thing that Paul the apostle always taught Timothy, was the thing of always be careful of the doctrine. Even Jesus Christ himself told his disciples, said, be careful what you hear, what you listen to, and how you process it. To Jesus, it was not only about what you hear. It was also about the right thing that you hear, how you process it as well is very important. And I think the tools of processing what you are hearing are coming from the doctrine, the sound doctrine. So build your doctrine first and be grounded and be rooted on it. And then you will realize that once then you start consuming information and knowledge, then your doctrine will refine it. It will sift it. You will eat the watermelon and spit the seeds, if I may put it like that. You know, but if there's no sift of your doctrine, then you are doomed. And so there were books that I consumed at the beginning of my calling, and I was actually talking about that, you know, in one of the episodes that is still going to air. One of my favorite authors in terms of doctrine now, theologically sound somebody, was Kevin Conner. And I read quite a lot of his books. I mean, my library is full of his books, and most of my theology is actually established on that. He's doctrinally sound, and now everything else that I consume comes from that. And now even something from a distance, I can tell from a distance that it's great, but not for me. You know what I mean? Because you've got to have an aim, even as, and this is something else that I also love to say, that my spiritual father played a significant role in influencing my DNA as a leader, as a preacher of the gospel. And I always say that I will always run away from any other leader or mentor that I meet on the way that will make me become a stranger to my father. I don't want to show up and then I'm going to speak a different language that my dad will be like, who are you listening to? Who was saying, you know what I mean? So I need to make sure that I understand how I'm wired as a leader. Because, and this is not to say other people are wrong in the way that they lead, but I believe every leader is wired in a certain way, because there is a calling attached to your leadership style. There is a destiny attached to your leadership style. So you can't be just any type of a leader. You know what I mean? Because you will turn out in a certain way. David had to become, you know, a certain type of a leader. Paul had to become a certain type of. If you compare Moses to David and David to Paul, they are all wired differently because they had a specific calling and assignment attached to them. So for me, it's basically about that, you know. And this also applies to any business person out there. Let's say you are not even a Christian for that matter. You've got to have a certain type of philosophy of business and start from there, so that any other thing, otherwise you will not be focused. You will meet this one, he will be saying this thing, and then all of a sudden you change, you are taking that direction. So you've got to be grounded in what kind of philosophy of business do you subscribe to. Even in ministry, what kind of philosophy of ministry? Because all of us are in ministry, and we are doing ministry in so many different ways. So you've got to find one that resonates with you, that resonates with your DNA, the way that you think, the way that you are wired, and then follow people who are going to speak to that kind and type of DNA. So that is what this thing is all about. So my last question as we conclude, because I know this is, you know, when I'm talking to people, I always get inspired and encouraged by what they say, and we can talk over and over again. But I want to conclude with this. Of course, you are young, you are a leader at church, but one area and one aspect which always stands out with me, particularly with young leaders, as all of us are, is when you are married, because that's a sphere of leadership. According to me, it's a sphere of leadership. And in most cases, when you're young and you're getting married, and you know, many people will actually, as a matter of fact, as a young leader, if you are not married, that on its own, it's already Suga's bag, or you know, it's under question. But marriage is a sphere of leadership. So as a young person, and especially because in this day and age, we don't lead the same in as far as home and marriage is concerned. Things have changed quite a lot. Now, what can you say around that, especially as a young leader at home, together with your wife, as you are building together your marriage, your family? You know, what can you say around that?
That's a beautiful question. I think one of the things, even Baba spoke about, one of the questions every time he calls house tour, the first line of contact, I know, how's my wife? And that brings that level of accountability. And one of the things we're actually talking and having this discussion with my wife especially during the year 2020, with everything that it came in. It gave us, it was a revealer. It was a revealer. And one of the things we learned, maybe to glean 2 lessons from there, is one, within leadership, within marriage, is avoid autopilot. I think one of the greatest enemies to a relationship within marriage is autopilot, because it's easy just to go with the flow, and just listen to msebenzini, we do business, we do church, we do this, but you don't intentionally invest in us. And that's one of the things that I would encourage every leader to be very intentional and carve out time to invest in your marriage. Part of how we do that weekly, we've got our time, which is a breakfast that we have, which is a day set apart, which is our day, because I can get carried away with golf, with other things, but that's a day where
I must still join you, by the way, with golf. I must still learn how to play golf, and then so that I can play together with you guys, because I'm told that there's a lot that goes on the golf course, so I need to be part of that.
And I'm sure that you'll do great with your mind, because it's a mind game. Before, but Baba always says, before it becomes a mind, it's only by physics, but
and then the mind takes over.
But I'm definitely, and I'm gonna keep pestering you until you actually play with that hole that's close to you. So carving out time for that. Then number 2, one of the things I've learned as well, and my wife actually taught me this, is how marriage is it's a mirror, not a window. As to how you do not see the next person, but it's a reflection of yourself. Every time I look at my wife, I actually see my own insecurities, my own lack of emotional intelligence, my way of thinking, which affects how I do things, how I was brought up. And every time I look at the mirror within marriage, I want to be better. I want to do better. And that's what keeps me growing, to actually tell myself, how can I be a better husband? Part of my affirmations, I daily have affirmations that I have, which is part of my leadership secrets. Amongst them, I am strong, I am courageous. One of them, the second clause, is I am blessed with a beautiful wife whom I love dearly. I'm willing to sacrifice my life for her. And those affirmations keep me in check, which, I'm blessed with a beautiful wife whom I love dearly, which is a choice that I'm willing to lay my life and serve her. And that keeps me serving her and intentionally investing within our marriage.
That's awesome. And you know what, for me, you can thrive as a leader in any other sphere, but if you don't thrive as a leader at home, it's a challenge. And I love what you're saying about autopilot, because many marriages are faced with challenges today, because couples decide to just let things be, you know what I mean? And nobody's saying anything, and before you know it, after 15 years of being in this autopilot mode, you find yourself deep in a ditch that is going to be very difficult to come out of, man. But it has been great chatting with you. So, but as we close the program, man, what are your last thoughts that you can share even with the viewers there at home as we are, drawing to a close?
Maybe to the viewers at home, there's no need for you to build a tower to get to the top. Build relationships. I think you mentioned that relationships are currents. Be very intentional about the relationships you have around you, especially in the world of social media. Who is speaking into you? Because they say you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. But now it's no longer in person, but on social media, your friend list, who is adding value to you. So be very intentional about your relationships. And then in conclusion, growth is really, it's daily, it's small things that you do. Be very intentional about taking charge and taking extreme ownership of your own personal growth development, because at the end of the day, you are the one who needs to live with yourself, and everything rises and falls, as John Maxwell says, on leadership. And it rises and falls on you. If it happens or it doesn't happen, at the end of the day, we're not going to blame Mfundi, Sumama, or Papa, circumstances. It's you. So take charge. Take charge.
Awesome, man. It was so great chatting with you. Thank you so much for inspiring us, and thank you for everything that you are doing in your life ministry. It's showing. We see, we are watching, and we are inspired. And may God continue to bless you together with your lovely wife, and may you just reach more higher heights and continue to impact, as the name of the church says, continue to impact the world, especially with the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us in Mfundi. We honor you greatly, and we appreciate all that you do and all that what you are.
Amen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, you viewers at home, you builder at home, I'm sure you have been inspired. I'm sure you have been sharpened. I'm sure you have been challenged to become a better leader. And our prayer is that you may continue to lead in your own space, lead in your life, lead in your family, lead where God has called you to lead. And we hope that your leadership style and your leadership acumen will take another level. So may God bless you.